Welcome to the Mint Door Podcast. Today we are delighted to have a very special guest, Dr. Emelia Sam. Dr. Sam is a unique blend of science and spirit. She brings a wealth of knowledge and experience to our conversation, having been an associate clinical professor of oral and maxillofacial surgery at Howard University in Washington, D.C.
Dr. Sam's passion for personal development has also earned her a prominent place in the field. Her articles have been featured in many renowned publications such as the Huffington Post and MindBodyGreen. In addition, she has maintained her long-standing blog, 360 Soul, where she shares her wisdom and insights on various aspects of personal growth and spirituality.
Dr. Sam's latest book, Compassionate Competency, Healing the Heart of Healthcare, is a testament to her extensive clinical experience, her emotional intelligence, and mindfulness. Her book sheds light on the importance of creating compassionate healthcare environments that nurture both patients and healthcare professionals alike. So join us as we delve deeper into Dr. Sam's unique perspective on the intersection of science and spirit, and learn from her extensive knowledge and expertise. And welcome to today's Mint Door Podcast episode. We are so thrilled to have you join us as we explore two simple but very fundamental and powerful questions with our special guest today, Dr. Emelia Sam. Today we will dive into the mind and experience of our guest as we ask her to share her unique perspective with these two questions.
Now, these questions aim to provide our listeners with valuable insights and guidance from someone who has achieved success and recognition in their industry. Whether you're just starting a career or a seasoned member of the dental profession, we're sure Dr. Sam's perspectives and advice will undoubtedly provide valuable insights and inspiration.
Yeah, so please sit back, relax, and get ready to gain valuable perspective as we dive into these two simple but powerful questions with Dr. Emelia Sam. Welcome to our podcast, Dr. Sam. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank both of you. I'm excited. So glad to be here.
Yeah, we are really looking forward to our conversation with you because we know that the answers to these are going to be really just insightful, inspirational, and hopefully we learn something too along the way. So the first question is, can you tell us about what insecurities over the course of your career or life that you may have been hiding behind your professional mask?
Yeah, big question. So I'm thinking specifically within the profession, but I think it speaks to really the theme of my life, probably all of our lives, but it's just that the insecurity of showing who you really are. And I know with dentistry, I know early on, actually, if I think about it, it was 2 years into dental school where I had an inkling that something was off, but I completed that. And I decided to do oral surgery. So I was 2 years into my residency where, again, that inner voice is telling me something isn't quite right. I finished that. I'm into my career, and here we come again. 2 years into it, there's that inkling again that something is off. And at that point, I attributed it to looking at my colleagues and seeing them appearing to be very satisfied with where they were. We'd all gone along a similar course, for some people it may have been 8 to 10 years. For me, it was 13 years of that post-secondary education to get you to that next point, right? You've completed all the requirements, you've gotten the licensure, you've done everything you're supposed to do, and then you get there. And it seemed like everybody was eager to progress from that point. And I was feeling that there was such a void. And I didn't know what to do with that. I didn't know where to go with that, who to express it to, because it just seemed like everybody else was pretty comfortable in their own skin. And I was feeling extremely, extremely insecure, despite the exterior, the professional mask, right? about being confident in having made the right decision to pursue this particular profession. Mm. There was nothing wrong with it, and um, there was still, those moments of pleasure. Like I loved teaching the students, I loved my colleagues, but there was that something missing. And again, I just didn't know where to go with that. Mm-hmm. And in our profession, maybe in many professions, but I know in dentistry, we are very good at, well, veneers. I mean, we are, people have an idea of how a dentist is supposed to present, what your practice is supposed to be like, or if you're in academia, the path you're supposed to follow. There's a very, I don't want to say rigid, but it's kind of narrow as to who you're supposed to be. And I didn't quite fit in that box, and it took me a while it took me a while again to be comfortable in my own skin.
Thank you for sharing all of that. And was there a turning point when you did start to understand who you were?
Yeah, and coincidentally, it happened with some other things that were going on in my life. So at that time, there was a relationship that had gone on for 4 to 6 years, long distance at that point. And I could feel those threads unraveling as well. And it just felt like everything, if you asked me a year or two before that point, everything where I thought I was headed, it felt like everything was about to shatter at that point. So I was the stereotypical person, not, well, people will talk about being on the cold bathroom tile, out in fetal position, just devastated with what's going on. I don't like the cold, so for me it was carpet. But I was devastated, and I literally found myself in fetal position, just not knowing what was next, but looking back on it, I think it's kind of interesting that people may find themselves curled up in that way, because fetal position really is, all it's signaling is a new birth, right? So around that time, I realized that I had stepped away from so many of the things that fed me. I loved inspirational books. I loved personal development. I loved to write. That was an early, activity of mine since since I could write, basically. And then it turned into the diaries and the journals and poems, and all of this I left behind during my education, because I'm on this path and this is what I'm supposed to be doing, and all that other stuff is considered extraneous. I left those pieces of myself behind. So when I found myself in this position, figuring out what's the next step, I had to return to those activities. So I returned to writing and other things too, songwriting and some other related activities. And at the time, blogs were really becoming a big thing. So one day I just literally had an instant inspiration. I call them divine downloads. That I was just going to start a blog, and I was going to share weekly inspiration with anybody who wanted to engage. And that was the beginning of my blog. At that time, it was called eSpace. And it was just me reflecting in a concise manner on really just life, how we're affected, how we want to engage, how we just want to move through life. And that really set me back up to find my way. And I should also mention that Emelia is my middle name. Fran is my first name. So up until that point, it was always Dr. Sam, Fran, Francis, depending on who's talking to me. But when I started writing online, I went by Emelia. So it was almost like I created this second persona and kept the lives very, very, very separate. So you asked me if there was a point. That was the beginning. A parallel life. I was Dr. Sam by day, and then I was Emelia after 5 and on the weekends. And I did not let those two worlds touch. So it took a few more years until I was able to share those layers of myself um, within the professional space, and then everything, started to come together.
Mm. Mm-hmm. Wow. Thank you once again for sharing all of that, because, I think to recognize, that was a point in your life that was a challenging time. And sometimes just talking about those, it brings things up. And so I'm interested how those insecurities and finding those, what were insecurities of yours, showing those in your profession, once you started showing those, how it shaped what you do now today.
Once I started sharing the insecurities to other people that I've been hiding them from.
Yeah, like of your true self, of who,
Yeah, because I was very much the meditation, gratitude journaling, um, spiritual retreat, whatever it happened to be at the time. And yes, I kept that separate. But I noticed that when I started to reveal layers, people were drawn to that.
Mm.
And when you engaged with them, usually one on one, behind closed doors, of course, they're going to let down their masks as well.
Mm-hmm.
So people who may have only related to me on a professional level, um, all of a sudden we're person to person, spirit to spirit. And I can see, over time, I understood that the thing that I was hiding, basically hiding from the profession, was probably the thing that it needed. Because I started to see how some of my colleagues, and I'm not talking about just at my job, I'm talking generally, if you go to conferences or you're speaking to other people, the dissatisfaction that they were having, the problems that they were having. Also, my students, a lot of them let down walls. I have so many stories. I mean, I never share them, but I keep their stories with me, and the troubles that they were having. I mean, at a basic level, everybody has trouble in dental school. It's just rough. It's rough. We all know this. But the personal troubles that they didn't know what to do with while they had to deal with this workload and all the expectations that we had of them, that the profession has of them, that the families have of them. And the other thing I was listening to were the patients. And I know that we all love to think that the ways in which we interact with our patients are of, I guess, the highest possible level. But if you listen to patients, and I'm not just talking about dental patients, just in general, a lot of them, self included, have had some pretty horrible interactions. And I'm thinking, but we're talking about compassionate care, but we're not necessarily being that compassionate. We might be courteous or efficient or what have you. We are providing, but we're not necessarily providing the care, not just the physical or not just the treatment, but on a personal level. So that's when everything really came together. And I wanted to, I say that my mission is to bend the world towards compassion. Found out how to do that in a professional space. So I really started talking about compassion and what does that look like in a healthcare environment? What is that actually composed of? Because we talk about it a lot, but it's so esoteric, and everybody thinks, not everybody, but a lot of people think it's just some mushy, intangible feeling. And I'm like, no, there are some concrete things we can do. So let's talk about this. So that's how the whole framework of compassionate competency came to be. And that was my true self.
Thank you. That, just goes to show, just listening to that intuition, which was knocking at your door several times, whispering to you several times, and look what beauty it brought forth.
Yeah. And that's the other thing. I think a lot of times people think because they made a mistake, they wasted time or, what have you. None of it was a mistake. It doesn't matter where you find yourself, whatever whatever situation you find yourself within, there's something that you can always extract from that. You carry it with you. And then whatever you do express in the future is, it comes through the filter of you. So it's unique and it's probably impactful, just because it's genuine. So nothing is a waste. Nothing is a waste.
That's
It's
good.
like, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And the whole side of compassion in healthcare, I think if we think back to where probably 100 years ago, it was white coats, it was formal, there was very little compassion in healthcare, to today where it's a really hot topic. And to hear people talking about it. And I think for people to understand what compassion is.
It is.
They think they know that definition of compassion, but it's not sympathy, or it's different, isn't it? There's a distinct difference. How do you see that difference?
Yeah. So to me, yes, a lot of people use compassion, sympathy interchangeably, but compassion isn't pity. Compassion isn't, I used to, my definition of compassion is to recognize one's own humanity, recognize that of the other, and to move from that space. Right? It's interesting. Sorry, I don't know, this may be like a little off the topic or so, but I look at the word compassion and looking at the origins. It's people talk about relieving somebody else's suffering, because compassion does have that added component of action, right? Taking action upon what you're feeling, as opposed to empathy, which is just the feeling part of it, right? But years ago, I had a conversation with such a kind soul, and he was talking about compassion. And he was thinking, to him, it wasn't just about suffering. It was also, if somebody was in delight, how he could share in that and enhance that for that person as well. And one time I was able to find a definition, and I've never been able to find it again, but they didn't talk so much about passion being the suffering, but passion being just an intensity of feeling. So if somebody is feeling pain, suffering, then I want to relieve that. But if somebody is feeling joy, happiness, then I want to enhance that. So that's, my definition of compassion is a little, I guess, extended from what people generally, think of. But you had asked me specifically in healthcare. It's interesting because we always say how we're so compassionate. And we have this funny relationship with it, really. It's in all of our codes of ethics. People always talk about, you have to be compassionate to go into healthcare. And I'm like, well, that's not the case, really. We're all here for different reasons. Some people came in because they're about, the person. They really want to help in that way. But you can help other people. You can help people in other professions. You really can. It's not just healthcare. We don't have a monopoly on that. Some people come for the profit, depending on what position they want to take. Some people, like myself, come in because it was practical. Healthcare is one of the professions that's not anytime soon going to be completely replaced by AI. It's a healthcare professions are in demand and they're growing. So there's practicality, and then there are other reasons that people come to the space. So my thing is, let's not assume that compassion is there. Let's teach this, because it's an integral part of what we say we're doing. So what does that really look like? It's the ways in which we communicate. It's, it's personal development. It's emotional intelligence. It's, can I pick up on the feelings, not just of my patients? Because a lot of times we only talk about compassion with respect to patients. What about compassion amongst each other? that's what shifts a workplace. That's what makes a team cohesive. And then the other element of compassion that people skip over a lot is self-compassion. And we don't have much of that in our space. Everything is so hard and driven, and there's goals to be achieved and all of that. Well, where's the self-compassion? So it's really all about relationships with your patients, relationships with your colleagues, and relationship with self. And again, there are ways that we can break that down and make it more concrete.
Well, we know that you have some great things that you can share with our audience, some resources. So maybe if you could briefly just share a little bit about what they are and then how people could find you.
Yeah, so you can find a lot of my writing at emeliasam.com. I will say right now the blog is on hiatus. However, there is years of material. There are years of content, short, to the point inspirations. And there are also some free offerings that you can download. If you go to emeliasam.com/thank-you, there are a few offerings there. So there is an ebook, which is how to create the life you really want, 20 small strategies for big changes. There's also a 20-minute audio called The Myth of Potential. And I think there are a couple other goodies. And for educators and students who are specifically interested in compassion and healthcare, if you happen to be on LinkedIn, if you go to my profile, you can download a document there that explains that whole framework. If you're not on LinkedIn, you can just reach out to me at info@emeliasam.com. Or excuse me, info@emeliasam.com. Yes, that'll work. And if you're interested in that PDF, just send me a message and I'll send that right out to you.
That's amazing that you have found yourself and are giving back to others. I think about so many people that do go into healthcare because compassion is a big piece of who they are, and that maybe they drift away from it through the training, through the achievement cycle and all of that. So I know you also have a book out called Compassionate Competency. Can you tell us a little bit about your book?
Yeah, Compassionate Competency, Healing the Heart of Healthcare. It's, again, breaking down compassion and helping people to understand what that looks like, again, in the context of healthcare. So it's really a blend of emotional intelligence and mindfulness. I take some of the tenets of emotional intelligence and mindfulness, and it's blended together so that all of the things that we talk about, and it seems like so much, but the communication, the observation, when we talk about diversity and inclusion and bias and all of it, patient needs, compassionate care, it's like everything brought together in a cohesive, straightforward manner. And it uses the word as compassion as a mnemonic, and each letter stands for a particular element. So yeah, these are concrete elements.
Fantastic. Oh, so many wonderful resources for our listeners. And I'm sure you've piqued the interest of a lot of people who have maybe had that little whisper that something's off. And so I thank you for sharing your story with us and sharing a little bit of your magic and how you're now bringing your gifts to the world and helping others. Really appreciate that.
Thanks for sharing your platform and allowing me to share the message.
Yeah, of course. Awesome. Well, we all hope that you, as our listeners, found some encouragement from today's podcast. You know how much we adore you, so please tune in for another episode when we're back, and we will see you all again soon. Thank you, Dr. Emelia Sam.